Hello again, everybody, and welcome to the two-man game on Claves Online. I'm Bob Ramsey. That's Matt Roccio. And Rocc, starting right out with Billiken news, lost a midweek game, lost a Saturday game, but out of nowhere, the Bills do have a game now. Instead of traveling to a place you can't get to from here, the Bills will be at home tomorrow night against Iona. So we'll break all those things down. But this day and age of scheduling around COVID is absolutely nuts.
Yeah, it really is. And when you heard how it broke down, and Travis Ford was on with Frank Cusimano on his program on 590, I thought he did a really good job breaking down how they called Pitino because they had seen him tweeting. They'd seen, hey, Iona needs a game. Where you at? And they called Pitino. They didn't get an answer, which was weird. They then tried a myriad of other teams to try to find out, hey, you guys have a game canceled. You have an open spot in your schedule. Let's make something happen here. And it just wasn't working out. The other teams were matching up and finding games. Well, Travis Ford then calls Rick Pitino's son and says, hey, has Coach changed his number or anything like that? Turns out he has. And almost immediately after Travis Ford contacting him, Coach says, yes, let's make this happen. They very quickly were able to come to a deal where Iona is going to get a game with SLU on their home there. And so it just worked out so quickly, but it's kind of crazy how SLU was in that scrambling motion. You saw there kind of late Thursday, really early Friday, if you weren't tapped in, maybe this wasn't going to happen. And then all of a sudden, as soon as they were able to get the right phone number, bing, bang, boom, it happens. There's a game, and heck, it's a really good game for SLU considering.
Yeah, let's break down some of the weird aspects of this deal. Obviously, you lose a conference game, but you'd already lost that game with Drake, and this game is as good, if not better. And people wonder, well, why is everybody so happy about this game? I've never heard of Iona. Well, as you know, the way the net rankings work, it's a really good game because at this point in time, Iona is rated pretty darn high in the 40s, I believe. And then if you like kind of the overall objective ratings, KenPom does a good job. You got the Bills in the 70s, Iona in the 90s, which is virtually even anyway. There's not much difference in 20 spots, certainly at that level. Really an opportunity for both teams.
Yeah, like you said, Iona's sitting at 47. They've gone up a little bit in the net basketball rankings. Obviously, the Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. That's a big thing. We've talked about that before. Games can kind of shift throughout the season. So picking up a game like this is going to be huge. We talked a lot about what is the tournament trail for the St. Louis Billikens this year. Do they have to win the A-10, or can they build enough of a resume off their non-conference schedule? And obviously losing that Drake game was a big hit to that. Just in theory, we talked about that on this show. And obviously when you don't have some of the wins that they weren't able to close out, that also kind of took away from it. But this is one that you can at least get one of those wins back. And, at this point, when you were looking at their conference schedule down the barrel, it's kind of nice to be able to go back a little bit and bump up that non-con schedule just a little bit more kind of after the fact. You never really get a chance to do that as a coach or a program. So really just great timing for St. Louis after it looked like it was going to be terrible timing. It's going to be a tough game for them. When you talk about not playing a lot of games, and conditioning has been a big point in a lot of Travis's comments over the last week or so since they came back. Not necessarily the best matchup for a team that might not have the freshest legs under him, but nonetheless, when you look at an 11-2 top 50 ranked net ratings team, if you can win this game, it's only better for the team, and then obviously you don't have to worry about a long layoff between conference games.
Let's talk about some of the drama in this game, and you were really right there as it's interesting because of the radio show you produce and are on with Frank Cusimano and 590 The Fan in St. Louis. You, for those who don't know, Frank, at the very beginnings of his career, covered the University of Kentucky when Rick Pitino was the coach and Travis Ford played, and knows both of those very, very well. And Ford played for Pitino and on or off the record. But off the record, I think you get a real sense how much Rick Pitino means to Travis Ford.
Yeah.
they are very, very close. And
Yeah,
so it's an interesting angle to this game.
Yeah, he talked today when he was on with Frank about, kind of as in his career and just his life, how much, Coach Pitino has meant to him. We talk about Travis Ford, and heck, if you ever talk about Travis Ford as a basketball player, I think people bring up how much of a hard worker he was and how he demands that from his players because that's the kind of player he was. It was fascinating to me when he told Frank today that work ethic is a big chunk of that is from Pitino, because when he got to college, he's like, I'm a hard worker. And then he saw what Pitino wanted him to do. And he was like, okay, now I'm actually going to become a hard worker. And so if you talk about how, gritty this SLU team is in different times under Travis Ford, well, you're going to see a reason why tomorrow night, you're going to see the guy who taught him that grittiness and Rick Pitino.
Yeah. And we talk about the game for next year, going back there. Iona is in New Rochelle. For those who don't know, I guess you would call it a suburb of New York City. Tiny little school. I don't know the enrollment, but it's weird. A couple of years ago, the Billikens practiced there. So I've been in their gym. A lot of those small,
a bit of a drive.
Those little East Coast schools, they almost look like high school gyms, but a beautiful campus, small. And so we'll be going back there, and the indications are early that the Billikens will be playing not on campus, but in one of the terrific venues around the New York City area. Apparently, Coach Pitino likes to get his team out and about in that huge metropolitan area, whether it's Madison Square Garden, the Barclays Center, or what have you. And there are some other really nice venues around the area. So this is going to be interesting and an idea that probably should have already happened.
Yeah, I agree. And heck, no shots to LaSalle, but I mean, you lose a game to LaSalle that's already been, rescheduled. And on the back end, you might get a St. Louis Billikens game in MSG next season. I mean, talk about a silver lining.
Yeah. And then one other thing, there's a sense of, I'll be feeling very competitive because there's a sense of bitterness for me. You may not know this. The last time the Billikens played Iona was in 1987. And believe it or not, the Bills played a doubleheader in Ireland, Cork, Ireland, against Canisius and against Iona. If you've seen their logo, they have I think the terminology is right, a Gaelic cross as part of their logo. And so terrific, right? Guess who didn't get to go? Yours truly. Oh, it's too expensive. We're not going to care. We're not going to do it on radio. So you can't go. So I'm particularly bitter. And while it was our several administrations ago, I want to take it out on Iona.
All right. Well, fair enough. I mean, listen, slip whatever note you need to change to Jordan Nesbitt to tell him to drop 30 on their head, put a poster or two up, do whatever you need to do, Rambler.
I've only seen highlights of Iona. The one thing that stands out alarmingly is that this team beat Alabama.
Yep. That's not nothing.
You may go through their schedule. Oh, that's all right. That's all right. They lost to Kansas. They lost to Belmont like the Billikens did. Okay. All right. Well, what's special about them? You beat Alabama. You better stand up and take notice.
Yeah, and they beat Alabama playing their game, which is they're going to run, they're going to play good defense. Stop me if you've heard this before about a Pitino school or, a Pitino disciple school that we might be covering a lot. They play great defense. They run like absolute crazy. And the key one, as we're talking about Rick Pitino disciples, they hit their free throws and they get to the line a lot, and then they hit them. And that's been a big thing, obviously, for St. Louis this year. It's been a huge thing for Iona as well. So that's one thing to watch as well. And the reason they get a lot of fouls called on them is because they play fast. They get teams on their heels. They get teams in 4-on-3 and 2-on-1 situations where a foul is simply a smarter play. That's why they get to the line, but then they hit those free throws. So they also listen. This team moves the ball fairly well. They do not have a dominant point guard in the same way of Yuri Collins, but
right.
the entire starting lineup together combines for almost 11 assists per game across the starting five. And then I think, and then even the bench guys each chip in like 1.5, 2, 2 assists per game. So it's not, the offense doesn't have the most dominant playmaking, but they move the ball well beyond having that. And I think when you combine it with their ability to get out and run, it's impressive.
Yeah, and except for their big man, the assists are divided almost evenly, except for Dylan Van Eck, who I don't think you would even really call him a point forward, but he's got 50 assists, and everybody else is in the 20s. And by everybody else, I mean 5 other guys.
Yep.
Yeah, and so there's an indicator they really move the ball. They have a team positive assist turnover ratio, which is more rare as each season goes by. They shoot the three. Percentage-wise, not as good as the Billikens, but they shoot more. Not a ton more. It's not a huge shooting in volume three-point team. All their shooting averages are just a notch below the Billikens, but still pretty decent.
The one thing I think is interesting is it is a top 75 defense by Ken Palm ratings. And one of the things they do is they keep teams off the three-point line fairly well. But here's the thing. My biggest complaint for SLU this year has always been they don't take enough three-pointers in my mind.
Agreed.
So I wonder if we're going to see a game where, and this kind of goes back to our episode early in this week where I talk about how important Gibson Jimerson is to this offense, where I don't need him shooting a lot. I just need him, being the anchor or being the spotlight, if you will, or drawing the spotlight. And so I think if SLU can find that middle ground where they're getting their threes up that they usually do, but they're not trying to force it, it's not going to be one of those games where Gibson's getting a lot of room. They're going to hedge him hard when he comes off screens. They're going to body him up. They're going to try to bump him. They're going to try to stop Gibson Jimerson from shooting threes. It's what they do well. My point is, though, is that that's not the worst thing you could see from a defense coming up against St. Louis. I mean, if I saw a team that had a lot of steals and a lot of blocks, that's been the Achilles heel of this St. Louis offense. They'll get the 3 shots they'll get, but I honestly think they might play pretty well in this Iona defense.
Yeah, they don't create a ton of turnovers. And so you're right. That could end up being a factor. They score a little less than the Bills, 76 a game. Both teams hold their opponents in the 60s. So statistically, really interesting matchups. They have a couple of players with length, but they're not one of these teams that, have a bunch of 6'8", 7-foot wingspan guys playing guard and all that kind of stuff. More or less, again, despite the fact they don't have a traditional point guard, size-wise, a little more typical.
Yeah, I think that's like not a ton of size, but I don't think it's a thing where St. Louis has a demonstrable advantage in that thing.
Either way, yeah.
Tempo and pace is going to be big. We talk about that. We talk about how fast St. Louis plays. If we're just trying to keep it even, this is why I like to I use Ken Palm because it's all even. St. Louis plays with a 98th ranked pace. Iona plays with a pace in the, where did it go? 56. So we talk about how fast St. Louis plays at just under the top 100. Iona's almost in the top 50. So that's the kind of thing you're trying to imagine when we say they play with pace. They like to pick it up. If you miss shots, they will run and they will score on those. We talked about it, in the previous show. Travis Ford did a great job of talking about how, you can preach running and you can preach a fast tempo as much as you want, but in the transition game, if you're not forcing the shots, there is no transition, and it's going to look like you're playing slower on purpose. Because he even said, he goes, people are saying we're playing slow on purpose. That's not the case at all. And so that's the thing with Iona. They are able to play at that pace, not just because they're good in transition, it's because they get stopped, and that helps them get out in transition. Those things are always balanced. So you see a top 35 defense, you see a top 50 pace, that tells you what they like to do in those situations, and those things are directly connected. And that could be the part where maybe SLU starts slipping up a little bit. You miss some shots, you get a bad run, you get a bad turnover, and all of a sudden that 4-point lead turns into a 4-point deficit really quickly.
Yeah, and so while you want to play quick, you don't want to take a shot that's too quick. Don't get in a hurry. Mm-hmm. Take the first, not the first shot you get, but the first good shot you get. What's good depends on what you're running in the offense, the looks you get, what are the matchups. And so some of that can be open to interpretation, but the players know if they're shooting too quick, can you move the ball? Can you get the defense moving side to side? Some of those things. If you can control the pace, not necessarily slow it, but control it, that's more important.
Couple things going into this game, because unfortunately I don't have the statistical breakdown of Iona. I usually like to have every episode because of how it got scheduled, and they weren't on the schedule. But I do have some questions for you, which is, do you think, based on how some of the people played in the changed up lineups earlier in the week, do you think we maybe see another game where Fred Thatch is in the starting role? Maybe this time instead of Marcus Strickland with TJ Hargrove completely healthy, maybe he's back in, but maybe we keep Janez on the bench to facilitate more of that second team scorer, microwave kind of role. Do you think we see something like that again?
I would be surprised because the lineup change last Sunday was predicated on guys not having their legs under them from missing 3, 4, 5, 6 days of practice. Did Travis see enough that he liked that he would make a change? I guess that's possible. I'll ask him that in the pregame interview tomorrow on radio on 97.1 FM in St. Louis, by the way. I'll ask him that. My guess is no. I think he'll go back to what he typically likes to do. The one thing we'll keep an eye on most, I think, because it doesn't matter to me as much who starts, but the key minutes. But is Martin Linson going to give you minutes at all, A? And B, if he does, will they be quality minutes? Is he going to be able to go?
Yeah, I would say, just like you said, because I think it helps. I think it just helps coaches space guys out when they do bring guys off the bench at the beginning of the game. I know it's a weird mindset thing, but I think it does help. And so honestly, I understood the switches. My kind of assumption with you is that undoubtedly the Marcus Strickland for TJ Hargrove one definitely felt forced, but I thought there could have been a tactical reason, for maybe switching out Nesbitt and Thatch. And so honestly, if they came out Yuri, Gibson, Thatch, TJ, Okoro, assuming Linson's still hurt, I'd be completely okay with it, because I think kind of facilitating those second team minutes where as soon as Yuri comes out, or the possession right before Yuri comes out, the possession right after Yuri comes out, the subs are DeAndre Jones and Jordan Nesbitt in some combination. And then giving those two guys the keys to the offense, kind of not switching off possessions, but each of them handling and starting and initiating about 50% of the offense in Yuri-less possessions. I think that is where the best SLU offense as a second team unit will come from. And so I think that just makes it easier to space people out if you do that. And I thought Jordan Nesbitt had a great game off the bench on Sunday, and maybe that could be something we see more often.
I think what you say makes perfect sense. And the other thing is, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Marcus Strickland has earned more minutes coming off the bench. And that'll be interesting to see. And so that would be a 9-man rotation. And usually I think it counts if you get like around 10 minutes or more. It's a round number, but it kind of does tell you've played a little bit and are part of that game's rotation. So it wouldn't shock me if he got close to that tomorrow night, Saturday night against Iona.
Yeah, and I think it works perfectly too with Martin Linson out. You slide him down to the 4, and his ability. I mean, you put him in the dunker spot. If Yuri gets a downhill, he can drop it off to him. Marcus is going to slam dunk that every time. And so I actually kind of like him in that kind of TJ role where it's 6'4", 6'5", wing forward that can throw it down like that. I actually love him as kind of like the backup 4 in a way right now to TJ Hargrove. I think that's a great role for him.
Yeah, I agree, and it sort of keeps your lineup looking the same as you send these guys through it. You still sort of have the same positive elements on the floor all the time.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that, but yeah, it was one of those radio guys stumbling upon his point as he's talking, kind of thing.
You
Just
nailed
my
it.
absolute favorite. I nailed it.
You nailed it. So, so it's interesting. So the Billikens will have that, and then we'll talk. I presume we'll talk Monday night to preview the Dayton game as you get back into conference play. But again, to kind of put the wraps on the Billiken talk, unless you had another issue or another question, is the Billikens worked hard in these extremely trying COVID times to find a way to take a negative and turn it into a positive. And it took a lot of work. I'm sure there were more than one coach up literally all night watching Iona video.
Oh my God! Yeah.
So I wouldn't be a bit surprised about that. And I'm really excited about there are great deals on tickets for folks still available, $5 and $10 seats. And it would be great to have a gigantic crowd for this really big time non-conference game.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It's like $5 upper section, $10 lower section. So there are lower bowl seats right now for an Iona SLU matchup for $10.
Go to SLUbillikens.com and you'll be able to find it.
My one last thing for the game. This is more of a what to watch for thing. This is kind of something I've had in my pocket for the last couple of shows, and I wanted to get it out on this one because it was accentuated on the broadcast, the TV broadcast side that I heard about how good SLU has been at the under the basket, out of bounds, out of the timeout plays. And it's been one of my favorite things to watch. Yuri's always inbounding. Specifically, this is anytime they get it under the basket. Yuri's inbounding, and what they'll do is they'll put Gibson at one of the elbows, and then whoever is the other wing at the other elbow. And then the action they run in there is one of my favorite parts of watching SLU play every game. Inevitably, what will happen is Gibson will set the first screen. His guy will come off to him to set another screen, and then he's setting a screen for the guy to set the final screen for Gibson to come off. And what SLU's doing for a long time, it was accentuated around Gibson coming off the screen he set to really get him open. But what they started to do is that teams have started to cheat that. Yes. And that's how they've gotten a couple of the really simple ones where Yuri just drops a bounce pass to the guy under the basket for an easy two. It's one of my favorite things that SLU's been doing. Every time they get a ball under the basket and Yuri's inbounding, watch for the play. It happens the same. In some way, shape, or form, Gibson's going to set a screen for somebody else. They're going to go around. A screen's going to come. It's going to free Gibson. And then either he's going to be free for a shot or they will have made a mistake most likely and someone's going to slip to the basket. It's one of my favorite things they do. And I think it's a great call. And the way that they add different iterations to it is always my favorite part. And I think it's the sign of a good offensive basketball coach when they find a play that works and they find those counters and those slips on the other side of it. It's one of my favorite parts in the game.
You know what's interesting about the way that play has evolved, and I don't remember exactly what game it was, but about a month ago, the Bills were having some struggles on inbounds. And so, because you had mentioned they started cheating, the defense started to cheat on that, and the Bills added those wrinkles, and that's what you got to do. Really in all sports, hitters and pitchers. I don't care what the sport is. The defense is going to take something away. You adjust. And that's the chess game that makes it so much fun.
Absolutely. So be watching for that chess game. Set, slower set moments are going to be huge in this game because I expect both, SLU's going to try to play a little bit slower and keep Iona from running. So those kind of set plays, slowing it down, out of bounds, out of timeout, that's going to be a huge thing for SLU in this game.
And finally, and then I'll throw NBA at you. This is me being overly defensive about semantics. And as you know, I'm anti-semantic. And that is not slow it down, but make sure and not take bad shots early.
Yeah, that's a much better way to phrase it. Yes,
I knew what you meant, but like I say, I get a little overly defensive.
Yes, everyone out there might not have it, and that's what we're here for, Ramber.
So what are you looking forward? What has recently happened, if anything, you've liked? Well, yeah. First of all, out on the West Coast, an unbelievable slump. What's going on with Steph?
I have no idea. It's officially the wildest slump of his career. I mean, he's had 6 games straight shooting below 25%. He had 5 of those games in his career before this season. It's completely inexplicable. It happened almost seemingly right after the record was set. At first, it was kind of like, oh, it's a weird thing. But then you can extrapolate his whole season, and it's one of his career lows in three-point percentage. He's not finishing at the rim at a very high rate. He's usually, to most people's shock, in the top 10% or so there. He's in, I think, the 36th percentile this year in finishing at the rim. Just completely uncharacteristic for what he is. So I'm not sure what it is. My only theory right now is that the reason the Warriors are this good right now without Klay Thompson is partially because he's taken such a huge load onto his shoulders. And I think maybe we're seeing a Steph Curry who in the offseason understood that he was going to have to put the team on his back until Klay got healthy. And so I'm thinking we're seeing a guy who's simply overworked, overtired, overfatigued. But at the same time, there could be a lot of things. This could be injury related. For all we know, he's
a bad wrist or something. Yeah.
Yeah, for all we know, or those damn ankles, those freaking ankles that almost ruined his career from the get-go. Yep. Maybe one of them's tweaked right now, and that's hurting. When you're shooting like he does, it's got to come from the feet up. And so,
always.
And so, that could be an issue. Like you said, the more recent issue in his career has been a wrist. Maybe that's kind of nagging him. That's definitely going to affect your shooting at the rim and deep. And so, there's got to be something here, and alarm bells are ringing in Golden State. Especially with their weird guru Joshua Tree crap that they try to act like they're running some kind of mystic factory of basketball that they try to do. So I'm sure they got some shaman running a stab over his elbow or something like that. But they got to figure something out, and it wouldn't shock me if Klay comes back, we see a week, and then we see Steph maybe down for some maintenance. And honestly, if that would help, I would be completely okay with that. Regular season doesn't matter. Get the 5 or 6 seed. Get Steph healthy. I don't know what's going on, but they got to figure something out.
But what would really be interesting to see if when Klay comes back, everything picks up, and it would support your mental and emotional fatigue point.
Yeah, that could also be it. Yeah, maybe Klay comes back and we immediately see an uptick because now he can pass the ball off to a Hall of Fame level shooter.
Hey, we've unofficially adopted the Memphis Grizzlies here on the 2-man game, and I saw a thing that I really wasn't aware of. I saw them in person, a month ago, 6 weeks. No, I guess it's 2 months ago now, and I didn't really pay attention to it because it wasn't really a competitive game. It was against Houston, and I saw somebody talking about how that the Grizzlies talk as much shit as anybody in the league.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It was an unnamed NBA executive said they talk the most shit in the league, and I was like, yeah, if you're like the youngest team and you're giving it to all these veterans and you just jammed up the Lakers and you beat the Suns who were the big young team before you, I'm not shocked at all. Like Desmond Bain has he's got some Maurice Jones-Drew, Draymond Green thing to him where he's like he's mad about where he got drafted and he's taking it out on the rest of the NBA to prove a point. And those guys, when you actually have some real motivation, those guys are dangerous. And Desmond Bain right now is dangerous. And so I'm not surprised. It wouldn't shock me if Desmond Bain is just every time he dunks on somebody or puts up a big shot, it's just like lottery pick. Should have been a lottery pick, just like jawing the entire time. The only thing that surprises me about this is that Jaren Jackson Jr. seems kind of quiet. And if I find out that he's like Tim Duncan out there and he's just like low-key eviscerating dudes with like a low mumble, I'm going to be so excited.
Well, I have a theory as well. My theory is that these young players are taking a cue from their veteran broadcaster, Rob Fisher, who talks a big game. And I think maybe that could be the genesis.
I like that. You know what? I love it. They're a lot of fun to watch. And this is the kind of storylines and stuff you want from a young team. So John Moran is one of the most affable young stars in the league.
Yeah.
And so I'm 100% down for it. That's one of my favorite parts about basketball here's the trash talking stories. I mean, Kevin Garnett. I brought up Tim Duncan because some people might be like, why did he bring up Tim Duncan about like low key shit talking? It's because Kevin Garnett just had a video hit the other day where he talks about how Tim Duncan was low key one of the deadliest shit talkers in the game because he'd get a bucket on you and he'd just be like, nice try, fella, and he'd just like pat you on the side and be like, nice try, or he'd hit you with a turnaround and be like, no, you gotta be better than that. Like, and it was just like old man, just like hurtful, just like, no, nice try, a little man. And like, if Jaren Jackson Jr. is out here doing that stuff, by the way, he has the most multi-block games in the league right now. He's a defensive monster. We've been talking about that. So if that's like Jaren Jackson Jr.'s thing, I'm so happy right now. And then, my favorite story in NBA history might be the Larry Bird. Hey man, I got a Christmas gift for you later. It hits the shot, turns around, Merry Christmas, motherfucker. Like that might be my favorite single NBA story of all time. So I love it.
Oh God, that is beautiful stuff.
And they're on a run. They're on a run again. They keep on winning. They beat Detroit 2 nights ago. Moran had 22. He's led them in scoring every game, or almost every game except for the big game from Bain against the Kings. He's led them in scoring almost every other game other than that. He had 4 30 pieces in a row, including a 40 ball. I mean, he's a monster. The Grizzlies are monsters. And you can watch them, in my guess, absolutely just shellac the living daylights out of the Paul George-less Clippers tomorrow afternoon. I love Saturday afternoon basketball.
Oh, yeah.
You get a 2:30 game tomorrow between the Grizzlies and the Clippers, and that'll get you ready for Iona versus Flu.
That's exactly right. So anything else you're looking forward to this weekend in the NBA before we wrap it up?
Yes, after I finish up here, I'm going to go watch the Nets and the Milwaukee Bucks because that's obviously an incredible game. In fact, a little live update right now. The Bucks are beating up on them a little bit. Bobby Portis has 16 points. I wasn't expecting that. Sorry, I had to do a double take on that one. That was unexpected. Apparently, Bobby Portis is giving the Nets the business right now. So I'm going to go watch the Bucks and the Nets. If you want to see something absolutely insane, apparently there's this young guy on the Bucks. He's talking about how he might be one of the best one day if he just works a little bit harder. I think he's pronounced his name Giannis out of the Anyway, Giannis was saying today that if he works a little bit harder, he could one day be one of the greatest. And
wow,
he's my favorite person. Like, how do you win a title, an MVP, dominate the league for multiple years, and then still just have this goofy little innocent smile and be like, if I still work hard, I could be one. I love Giannis so much. So he's a young kid
so
trying to work hard and make it in the NBA.
Yeah. So once he starts working hard, who knows?
Yeah, sky's the limit, right?
Oh, crazy. So good. Well, we'll visit with everybody again Monday night. We'll recap the weekend and preview the Billiken Dayton game coming up and hopefully coming off a win against Iona. It'll be a battle tomorrow night at 7:00 at Chaifetz Arena. So that's going to wrap things up. Rocc, have a great weekend.
You too, Rammer.
That's Matt Rocchio. I'm